I'm really happy that folks from so many parts of the country and time zones and eras of Collegium can be gathered on one screen at this moment in time. I know that scholars are going to be studying the impacts of COVID for years to come. And I really hope that when they do that, the ability to convene across time zones and learn about ideas that matter with people that we really care about gets entered into the wins column, into the positive column. I'm genuinely delighted to welcome Dr. Steve Mayer to this Zoom room. Steve is an experimental physical chemist who is deeply interested in big questions, capital B, capital Q. His scholarship and his teaching are kind of a Mobius strip in recent years. He set his capacious mind and heart to making novel improvements to the physical chemistry laboratory, creating new pathways for his students and those of his colleagues throughout the world to enhance their skills and knowledge. He's also made it a project to explore a question at the confluence of science and faith. What did the ancients know about the workings of the universe? Is there wisdom that a physical chemist striving to find order in the cosmos of 2022 might find in the similar endeavors of curious seekers centuries ago? His early answer is yes, which is why we're gathered today. Steve's going to walk us through his novel adaptation of the ancient practice of Lectio Divina that he uses to help his students and sometimes even himself make sense out of the most complex scientific phenomena. He calls this approach Lectio Entropia, and I am going to get out of the way and turn things over to Steve and invite him to lay out his plan for us. Before I do that, I really need you to call your attention to somebody that I forgot to have her introduce herself, and that's Darlene Schneewind. I don't know if she'll open up her video, but since January, Darlene has been the administrative assistant for Collegium and has done just astronomically fine work, cosmically good work, in the words of Dr. Steve Mayer. So really glad that she can join us here today and glad that she's part of the Collegium team. So with no further words from me, bumbling or otherwise, I welcome Steve Mayer of the chemistry department at the University of Portland. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Karen. Not bumbling at all. In fact, I like the Mobius strip imagery. I hadn't thought of that, but now that I have, I'm going to use that wholesale. Welcome, friends. This is a fun opportunity to talk about something that I've been doing since spring semester of 2020. I started it out in my physical chemistry class, and just last spring, I decided to give it a go in general chemistry. And I'm going to tell you the story about that, how it all came about, and where it is right now. Of course, you notice, I would imagine more than a few of you picked up on the Monty Python reference there. It really is something completely different. And in the true Monty Python use of that phrase, using an ancient Christian meditation practice in chemistry, science in general, and maybe you can tell me, then when we get to the discussion section of this, I have a couple of questions to ask, and I want to find out, what might it do in other courses, maybe in philosophy, because we got a couple of philosophers in here. I really want to learn something today. So this is the book that I'm using, and hence Time Bandits. It just popped into my head. I thought I'll use that. Sounds like fun. Carlo Rovelli is a theoretical physicist working on something called loop quantum gravity. So he's a theoretical cosmologist, and interestingly, an atheist, and he is vocal about that and careful as well. He's somebody who I hope to one day meet him. I would love to sit down and just have a conversation, maybe tell him what I'm up to. And I suspect that he'd be gracious and hopefully have some ideas that where this might go. This book is ostensibly about time, but it's really about the destruction of time, or at least our concept of it, because what it turns out to be is just a construct. It turns out that the thing that's real in the universe is entropy. And since I know that there are physicists and physical chemists, you're well aware of the concept of entropy and also the difficulty of getting that across to students. So let's go back to the beginning of the story. Where this started was, it was winter of 2019, and had no idea of what was facing us in the spring. But there I was out walking my Siberian Husky, and I decided to listen to this book on Audible. I'm one of these kind of folks that has a much better time out exercising my body while I'm letting my mind just sort of run with these ideas, and making sure the dog will sleep that tonight. The devil will find things for idle paws to do. So that's what I was out there doing, is making sure that my dog did not get into any evil. As the book was unfolding, what I discovered was that Ravelli was really talking about entropy, and how entropy is the thing that drives all processes, that our concept of time is really rooted in this. But not just that, Ravelli writes in a very beautiful, prosaic way, a way that is, well, it's brought me to tears on a number of occasions, not just this book, but some of his other books that he's written. It's just gorgeous. He writes in Italian. He is fluent in English, French, and maybe a couple of other languages as well. I don't know. But his research papers are all written in English. But what he did is he wrote this in Italian, his native tongue, and arguably one of the most beautiful, maybe the most beautiful language that we have in modern languages, and then had it professionally translated into the English. Even still, it retains that beauty, the lyricism. There's something transcendent about the way he writes. And I had this thought. I was out there in the pouring down rain with my dog, and it was cold and wet, and I was thinking, how do I get this into my physical chemistry class? And on the way home, I was thinking, well, maybe I can have them read, maybe write a paper. I was like, that sounds boring. There's got to be some other way. So I walk in the door, and my wife, Shannon, who's in here today, was reading a book by Jamie Smith. Well, he was one of the editors on a book about bringing Christian practice into the classroom. And she said, check this out. She said, for instance, if you were teaching a sociology course on hunger or food insecurity, you could have the students fast, and that would put them in a different place to tackle the subject. Or maybe you could use Lectio Divina. I said, that's it. Lectio Divina. That's how I get this book into my class. The next day I went to my favorite Italian coffee shop, ordered a couple or 5 cappuccinos, and I banged this thing out, and then walked into my classroom maybe a day later. So this happened fast, and it has turned out to be magical. So what I decided to do is call it, rather than Lectio Divina, it's not divine reading, it's reading about science. And so I Latinized. Actually, it's an English word. Yeah, it shows up in the English dictionary, but Rudolf Clausius took essentially Greek, and he turned it into this word entropy. And so that's what I called it. So if anybody in the audience is fluent in Latin, my apologies. I hope that's okay. That book is pretty heady, and so it's appropriate in a physical chemistry class. In fact, it's the second semester, so the way we teach it at UP is quantum mechanics in the first semester, statistical and classical thermodynamics and chemical kinetics in the second semester. So it happens in the second semester where we're talking about thermodynamics. For general chemistry, I wanted something that was a little more approachable. And this book, with a fairly unapproachable title, it seems, very long title, is a collection of Ravelli's essays. And they are written in his beautiful style, but they're very approachable. And I found that general chemistry students really glom onto them. They really enjoy this level of writing. The science is not too hard. In fact, it's more social commentary than it is science. Okay, so learning as formation, I decided to introduce this as a practice. So I am very careful with the students. I don't say this is an activity, this is homework. I don't use any of the language that we normally use in chemistry courses to talk about the kinds of activities that we engage in. I call it a practice, and deliberately so, because what I want them to do is I want them to embrace this as something that is maybe other than, say, solving problems. So two of the quotes that I picked up from this book, Teaching and Christian Practices, Reshaping Faith and Learning, we are formed by the practices in which we participate and not merely by the ideas we exchange. And practices then are not just things we do, they do something to us. And that's what I aimed to do with this practice, is I wanted it to do something to the students. So they're engaging in this and it's changing the way they think. This is not problem solving. This is not trying to get your head around some concept. There's no assessment per se with this, such that they can be free to think and to feel. So here's how it goes. And we're going to do an example of this, a fairly short, and it's not going to be the complete practice, but I want to give you a sense for what these elements are. Number one, silencio. And I get this from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the usccb.org. If you go there, I would imagine many or most of you have probably been there for a number of things. You can find the Lectio Divina in there, and that's all I did. I grabbed Lectio Divina and then I adapted it for what I'm doing in chemistry. So the silencio is the part where I tell the students, you've got to get yourself silent. Put away your devices, try to get yourself into a place where you don't have roommates running around, you're not in the middle of the kitchen or the dining room. Go find a quiet space and allow yourself to calm down. This could take anywhere between 30 seconds or 10 minutes. What I have found, and I tell the students this, 10 minutes doesn't work for me. My mind starts to go off and then I kind of lose it. So I have to get myself into a space, I'm quiet. And then it's usually less than a minute. I finally get to myself to the place where I'm satisfied. Okay, I'm not thinking about anything other than what I'm about to do. That's it. And then I begin the reading, the Lectio. And what I assign to the students is usually maybe, it's always less than 10 minutes. It's maybe of the order of 5 minutes, plus or minus a minute or two. And that's all it is. It's very succinct. And what I'm looking for is something that's going on in my heart, as it were. Not so much my head as it is my emotional state. What is it that is coming to me? And once that's done, then comes the meditatio, the meditation phase, where I'm just meditating on a word, a phrase, concept, even a picture. I tell some of the students, if there's a picture that comes into your mind, meditate on that, but stay there. Stay there for as long as you need until you feel like you want to talk about it. And the talking about it, the oratio, is the response. And so I'd give them these little Moleskine notebooks, kind of like the little, I don't know, they're 9-inch ones. And I tell them, write one page. Don't write any more than that. You can write less than that, but don't write any more than that. This is supposed to be compact. It is a succinct capture of what you've just been doing in your head. And I tell them, you can write, you can draw pictures, you can scribble, you can do whatever it is that gets your thoughts onto that page. And I will not look at this unless you would like me to. So it is yours. It's private, and it's just for you to record your thoughts. And then finally, the contemplatio. And I like to tell them, it's like, if you've done yoga, this would be Savasana, the corpse pose, the place where you rest from the work that you just did. And so they seem to like that idea. It's like, oh, I just get to sit there and just kind of chill. Exactly. That is exactly what you're doing. You're resting from these 4 steps that you just went through. And that's the end of the practice. Now, every week, so my class meets on Tuesday and Thursday, both my physical chemistry and my general chemistry class. And so at the beginning of the Thursday class, I begin with the examen. And I know this is I'm taking a Benedictine practice, ancient Benedictine monastic practice, and I'm bringing a little Ignatian salt into it, I guess. The examen is an opportunity for the students to share something. And so I tell them, we're going to begin class. I will invite you as a student to share one insight. And then I remind them that this is going to take practice, discipline, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to deftly express your thoughts to a group. And what I make sure that I really highlight, and that is this: you're going to speak and listen with respect and extend grace to one another without judgment. So this really is about learning how to respect oneself, learning how to respect others, because what you're bringing are your thoughts. What do you want us to know? What occurred to you? How do you feel about this? And because people are opening themselves up to a fairly large group of, usually, especially in general chemistry, people they don't know or know very well, and they're, they might be exposing something about themselves. Begins a little rough usually. Week 1, the very first group to go, like in general chemistry, is kind of rough. But by the second round, which we're going to start this Thursday in Gen Chem, it's brilliant. I am always amazed. Not surprised, because I've learned to expect that this will happen, but I'm always amazed at what they say. It's tremendous. And then every month, I do an incarnatio, where the students write a brief collection of their thoughts and then meet with me for a conversation. Now, side note here, physical chemistry is typically a very small class. At UP, PChem 2 can be, a good sized class would probably be 15 students. Lately, we're usually under 10. So that means that I can actually have one-on-one meetings or group meetings with students. 2, 3 is about as much as I found is good for this kind of activity. But they'll come to my office, we'll have a conversation, just free form, going wherever they want to go with it. And as I like to talk and listen, these things can extend for a while. I think I've probably talked with students maybe like an hour and a half, just sitting there and talking. And other students will come and say, hey, come join us. We're talking about this. And so it's amazing what comes out of this particular practice. For general chemistry, it's a bigger class. There's 30 students. So we can't really do that same thing we do with PChem. So for the Incarnatio, it hasn't happened yet. We're about to come up on our first one. They're going to write just a one-page collection of their ideas, their thoughts. It's essentially just a reflection piece. And if they want to come talk to me, then I encourage them to do that. A few folks have taken me up on it, and I'm glad for that. But I want it to be, again, not an onerous thing. I want it to be something that's freeing for them, something outside of their normal experience with a science course. Okay. So let's do this. You guys ready to do this as an activity? So what I have here is it's the audible version of the intro to the Order of Time. This will give you a sense for Ravelli's flow, for the kinds of word choices that he makes. And well, you'll recognize the narrator on this. somebody famous. This wasn't just, somebody who reads really well. Well, enough said. So let's do this. We'll begin. I'm going to move you through it. So this is kind of artificial in the sense it's not you just doing it, it's me directing it. But what I'd like you to do is to get a sense for how this goes. So let's jump back here. So we'll start out, we'll do the silencio, just a few seconds. I'm just going to pause and then I'll hit play. And then when that's done, then give you, maybe about a minute just to meditate on something that you picked up in the reading, or the listening in this case. And as soon as you're done with that, then we'll move into the oratio, where if you have something to write with, that'd be great, so that you can write down what it is that struck you. And as soon as you're done writing, again, I'll give you the cue, Sarah, let's move into the contemplatio. We'll do that for maybe 30 seconds, and then we'll open it up. And I want to see, how did this strike you? What happened in you when we did this? Okay, any questions before I kick this off? Excellent. All right, here we go. Cue this up. Come on. Okay, so I have another way of getting at this. I think. All right. All right, here we go. All right, so let's just take just a few seconds, silence, and then I'll start the reading.
Perhaps time is the greatest remaining mystery. Even the words that we are speaking now, thieving time has stolen away, and nothing can return. Book 1, Ode 11. I stop and do nothing. Nothing happens. I'm thinking about nothing. I listen to the passing of time. This is time, familiar and intimate. We are taken by it. The rush of seconds, hours, years that hurls us towards life, then drags us towards nothingness. We inhabit time as fish live in water. Our being is being in time. Its solemn music nurtures us, opens the world to us, troubles us, frightens and lulls us. The universe unfolds into the future, dragged by time, and exists according to the order of time. In Hindu mythology, the river of the cosmos is portrayed with the sacred image of Shiva dancing. His dance supports the coursing of the universe. It is itself the flowing of time. What could be more universal and obvious than this flowing? And yet, things are somewhat more complicated than this. Reality is often very different than it seems. The Earth appears to be flat, but is in fact spherical. The sun seems to revolve in the sky when it's really we who are spinning. Neither is the structure of time what it seems to be. It's different from this uniform, universal flowing. I discovered this to my utter astonishment in the physics books I read as a university student. Time works quite differently from the way it seems to. In those same books, I also discovered that we still don't know how time actually works. The nature of time is perhaps the greatest remaining mystery. Curious threads connect it to those other great open mysteries: the nature of mind, the origin of the universe, the fate of black holes, the very functioning of life on Earth. Something essential continues to draw us back to the nature of time. Wonder is the source of our desire for knowledge, and the discovery that time is not what we thought it was opens up 1,000 questions. The nature of time has been at the center of my life's work in theoretical physics. In the following pages, I give an account of what we have understood about time and the paths that are being followed in our search to understand it better, as well as an account of what we have yet to understand and what it seems to me that we are just beginning to glimpse. Why do we remember the past and not the future? Do we exist in time, or does time exist in us? What does it really mean to say that time passes? What ties time to our nature as persons, to our subjectivity? What am I listening to when I listen to the passing of time? This book is divided into 3 unequal parts. In the first, I summarize what modern physics has understood about time. It's like holding a snowflake in your hands. Gradually, as you study it, it melts between your fingers and vanishes. We conventionally think of time as something simple and fundamental that flows uniformly, independently from everything else, from the past to the future, measured by clocks and watches. In the course of time, the events of the universe succeed each other in an orderly way. Pasts, presents, futures. The past is fixed, the future open. And yet all of this has turned out to be false. One after another, the characteristic features of time have proved to be approximations, mistakes determined by our perspective, just like the flatness of the earth or the revolving of the sun. The growth of our knowledge has led to a slow disintegration of our notion of time. What we call time is a complex collection of structures, of layers. Under increasing scrutiny in ever greater depth, time has lost layers one after another, piece by piece. The first part of this book gives an account of this crumbling of time. The second part describes what we have been left with, an empty, windswept landscape, almost devoid of all trace of temporality, a strange alien world, which is nevertheless still the one to which we belong. It is like arriving in the high mountains where there is nothing but snow, rocks, and sky, or like it must have been for Armstrong and Aldrin when venturing onto the motionless sand of the moon. A world stripped to its essence, glittering with an arid and troubling beauty. The physics on which I work, quantum gravity, is an attempt to understand and lend coherent meaning to this extreme and beautiful landscape, to the world without time. The third part of the book is the most difficult, but also the most vital and the one that most closely involves us. In a world without time, there must still be something that gives rise to the time that we are accustomed to, with its order, with its past that is different from the future, with its smooth flowing. Somehow, our time must emerge around us, at least for us and at our scale. This is the return journey, back towards the time lost in the first part of the book when pursuing the elementary grammar of the world. As in a crime novel, we are now going in search of a guilty party, the culprit who has created time. One by one, we discover the constituent parts of the time that is familiar to us, not now as elementary structures of reality, but rather as useful approximations used by the clumsy and bungling mortal creatures we are. Aspects of our perspective, and aspects too, perhaps, that are decisive in determining what we are. Because the mystery of time is ultimately perhaps more about ourselves than about the cosmos. Perhaps as in the first and greatest of all detective novels, Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, the culprit turns out to be the detective. Here the book becomes a fiery magma of ideas, sometimes illuminating, sometimes confusing. If you decide to follow me, I will take you to where I believe our knowledge of time has reached, up to the brink of that vast, nocturnal and star-studded ocean of all that we still don't know.
Let's take a few seconds to meditate on something. Now let's move into the response part. Okay, now let's do the contemplatio. Let's rest from the work that we just did and see what happens. Okay. Let's bring ourselves back to the present. So I have a couple of questions for you, but before we get to that, I'd like to just hear some general impressions. What did you think? Do you like Benedict Cumberbatch reading to you?
Of course.
Yeah, can't go wrong there. Let's see, Kara, looks like you raised your hand.
Yeah. I loved it. I actually found out through DNA that I'm related to Benedict Cumberbatch, which is kind of weird. But
Nice.
I know the things you find out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was really upset today about a couple of things that have been bothering me. And I realized in time, these are meaningless. And I wrote a little reflection, but I don't know if we're doing that yet, but I realized how meaningless our worries are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good, thank you. Oh, and so, when we do the examine, when people share, I tell them, I try to limit myself to not turn it into a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not always good at it. Sometimes like, oh, that's great. And then I like run with it. But I say, okay, my goal is to try to discipline myself so that I simply say, thank you, and then we move to the next person so that they can speak. So it doesn't become about me and what I'm trying to draw out of them. It's more about them. What do they want to tell the class? Paul.
Great. Yeah, that's the reading struck me as like an overture to a symphony that we were about to hear, and maybe it was more than just an analogy there. That there is also for me, it reminded me of the relationship between music and time, and music as a practice of sculpting time in interesting ways. You know, through the ear. It was one of the was one of the quadrivium, right, in the classical liberal arts, is one of the 4 subjects that were connected with mathematics and number, arithmetic, geometry, and music, and then astronomy. So it was beautiful, and I also wanted to share that that time, that maybe our primary access to a truth about time is through feeling and through pathos, and not through thinking, which is not the case with other physical phenomena. I think, like, if we look at the sun and the moon, we can be inspired and awestruck, but it kind of lends itself to thinking about spaces and measures and things like that. But time, which can't be really seen, but can be felt, maybe there's this invitation that some things which are primordial are that our basic access to it is through pathos and what we feel. And that's the way I think we feel time. It's in a way, it's the way we feel time is that when things happen, they can't unhappen. And even, I think, Carol, you were talking about memories. A memory is in some ways intrinsically a kind of a recognition of something that is no longer. It's not present. It's gone. It's sort of behind. It's lost. It can't be retrieved in some way. So I think we feel that. I do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, excellent. Any other comments before I ask my questions? Okay, I'm not shutting this down. It's you know, maybe there's some things that'll come up that you want to say a little bit later, but yeah, let me move to the question part here. So grab this thing out of the way. So what I'd like to do is have you think just a bit about how would this practice cause students to think differently about your subject compared to the typical assignments that you use to facilitate learning. That's one side. And the other side of this same coin is, how is this practice similar to learning activities that you currently use? Seems like we're kind of science heavy here. But even still, tell me what you think. So maybe just to attack this first one, and that is, how's this different? What's it accessing? Oh, Katie.
Yeah, that's okay. I teach a class for the Master of Divinity students on fundraising, and oftentimes it's challenging for them because it's hard for them to ask for money. And usually my approach to teaching them is to just have them practice with one another. But I think having them read, Henry Nouwen has some great work that he does on fundraising, and having them read that, and then go through this process to kind of meditate a bit more about where God is calling them, I think might be a very unique approach to it that might kind of get them out of that initial fear of like, oh my gosh, I have to ask someone for money.
Yeah, so more like a getting them to engage in a practice maybe over here that kind of circumvents whatever fear they might have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of what seems to be coming out of this practice in both physical chemistry and general chemistry now, is that students seem more bold, more courageous about sharing what's on their hearts and minds. So it seems like it has, it's gotten around this sense of, oh, I'm in this class, I'm competing with everybody else. You know, what if they know that I don't know how to solve this problem? Now they're more bold. It's like, so what's a mole again? Like, all right, let's do that. Let's talk about that.
That's good
Thank
to
you.
hear. I'll have
Yeah.
to try it then.
Yeah. Nora.
Yeah, so I was reminded, and this is kind of concrete to the particular example that you used, but then anyway, this book called Timefulness, How Thinking Like a Geologist Can Help Save the World, because thinking like a geologist is thinking in terms of deep time, which students have a really hard time getting their heads around. And so I was thinking, well, this practice, whether you did it with this or you did it with a whole lot of other things, would engage their imaginations, engage a kind of radical imagination, to free them up from all of the kind of typical expectations that they have in a class, and free up their minds to think more broadly.
Yeah, I think that's helpful in the sense I hadn't thought about it in terms of deep time. Because we talk about, like in chemistry, a mole it's an incomprehensible number, and when we talk about millions, well, I was going to say let alone billions of years, that is also incomprehensible, and we have a hard time with thousands of years is hard for us, maybe even hundreds. But yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it in that respect. Thank you. Scott.
So what I kind of thought about was how the meditatio part really helps them maybe relate to the different ideas and concepts better. So when they're meditating, it seems like it might be about them. And then they can, maybe relate the different concepts to their lives more, and that's something that I know, especially in like PChem, that, they might just be doing math or looking at specific problems, but this way it does help them, maybe make some of those connections between, some other part of their life, whether it's another class or something else that they know, some prior knowledge, maybe links things together a little bit.
Yeah. I think a lot of times students will say, "Oh, I learned about this in my philosophy class." Philosophy is the one subject that shows up over and over again when students are commenting. And then if one student talks about what they learned in philosophy, then that triggers another student to maybe say the same thing. I'm hoping what'll happen is perhaps somebody will say, "Oh yeah, in my 18th century British women's literature course, we were talking about this," and try to make those connections. I haven't heard that yet, but I've only been doing this since 2020, so maybe that'll pop up. Side note, as a physical chemist, this book works great for thermodynamics. Ravelli's one of his, I think is his newest book, Helgoland, which is about Werner Heisenberg developing quantum mechanics. I think that one's going to work great for the quantum mechanics part of PChem. Let's see.
Looks like Kevin has a question.
Yeah, Kevin. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, that's great. I think maybe not just even discipline specific, but I just love the way that the silencio part gets people to slow down, and the fact that it can take up to 10 minutes. I've read and even the other pieces, right, and being allowing them to have time. And just finished reading a beautiful book by a practical theologian, John Swinton, called Becoming Friends of Time, and looking at time through the lens of people with cognitive disability, and how our world is geared towards thinking of time as a finite thing that you have to be productive and move, and how often in our classes we don't allow space for the students who are slower to really process. And oftentimes people with cognitive disability can, or at least sometimes can, do everything that those of us on the call here could do, but they just need more time to do it. And so just the slowing down and what the Lectio does, I think allows some space for that.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that. And the student comments that I've gotten have been along the lines of that they really look forward to it. It's something that they actively begin carving out that time, almost like they become so engaged in it that it does start to transform the way they go about their day. Like thinking about, where am I going to put this? And I'm very forthcoming with them to say, hey, if you guys get behind, that's okay. I'm behind right now, and I don't need to know why you're behind. But if you get too far behind, let me know, because I have some ideas about how to get back in the game. It's not try to bang this thing out and do 4 of these in one night. That completely circumvents what it is we're trying to do with this. That's not how you do it. But I do tell them, I say, look, if you want to know how to get back in, you need to come talk to me. I'm not just going to tell everybody, because it might be different depending on who the student is. They might be telling me about something they've got going on, and I would work out with them some way of getting re-engaged. And so students, especially now, they're coming to us with so many disabilities, either diagnosed or just part of the world we live in, and things that are getting in the way of them being able to really engage in the life of the mind. And something I found with this practice is, it's in some ways it's a way for me to find out how they're doing if they come talk to me. Therein lies the trick. What else? What about this other question about how's this practice similar to learning activities that you currently use? Maybe it's not. Maybe this is out of the box. Carol.
Oops. Let me start my video. I work with faculty, not students, but my video won't start. There it is. There is something that I do with them, and that is that we read their work slowly, especially if they're stuck in their writing. We meet for short periods of time frequently, sometimes every day. I ask them to give me 10 or 15 minutes. And they read to me from the thing that's, especially if they're far from it, like let's say they put it down years ago and they're trying to make themselves read it. And something magical happens when we slow down, because it gives them cognitive time to engage with each idea and to start coming up with new ideas. What's also super cool is I don't have to do the reading anymore. It just sort of happens between us as they read to me. And I concluded that reading papers, in my case with faculty, but in other people's case with students, and then marking them could be a form of violence. And that it actually might be more peaceful to just slowly engage ideas together. And this felt like that. This felt exactly like that.
Excellent. I was hoping that that something would show up here today, where there was some commonality with a practice someone had tried. I like that. I mean, maybe like is the right word. Agree that sometimes grading or assessing feels, if not violent, certainly aggressive. You're trying to go after something. You're trying to correct something. Yeah, and this is not that. This is a very different kind of engagement, where it really is about seeing how people think, and everybody thinks differently. And this idea that that Kevin pointed out, that everybody is at a different pace. Um, Learning was slow, a very slow process for me. And I was not on the same schedule, especially in organic chemistry, of trying to get all the mechanisms memorized in order to be able to spit it back out on an exam, which I know is not the way most people teach this now. But it took me a long time to really get my head around things. But once I did, then I really got it. I guess in the words of the most recent Nobel Prize winner in physics, I wasn't a particularly good student. I just read that this morning. I was like, oh, you too. But I am now. Scott.
One thing I'm teaching thermodynamics right now. And one thing that I do is I give them like once a week, I give them a different paper from JPhys Chemlet. So just like a physical chemistry journal, short article, 3 or 4 pages. And then I have them just kind of fill out some general questions, just kind of summarize in their own words what they kind of got out of it, what they think the points are, and then try and just mention some things about, how it relates to them, that sort of thing. Just have them kind of think about it. And when I was looking at kind of like the meditating on like this for this step or the oratio, writing about it, I do kind of see, some kind of parallels there. Not 100% overlap, but I see a little bit, definitely.
Yeah, trying to get the students to get outside of the text or even the curriculum specified by the American Chemical Society. You must do these things. Like, okay, we'll do these things. We're gonna do some other stuff too. Yeah, I like that other stuff. All right, just a couple minutes remaining. Any other comments before we wrap up here? Okay. Thank you for coming today and for really engaging in this. I don't know what you're trying to call it. It's a practice, but it's maybe more than that. There are a lot of things going on, and there's another Monty Python reference for you. But I hope that this has sparked in you something that you can maybe take away and maybe bring into your own classes. And I would love to talk to people about this. So if you want to just shoot me an email, mayer@up.edu. And maybe Karen, you can put that in the notes. And yeah, and then Karen, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I'm going to drop it into the chat before we go. And I want to thank Steve for his really careful preparation and this glimpse of a strategy that seems like it could really be portable to a lot of different contexts. I want to thank all of you in the room, too, for carving time out of a schedule that I know teams. I'm going to invite you to keep an eye out on your Collegium newsletters that are now coming out about every 6 or 7 weeks. We'll do another session in the spring. And that, I think, is going to be a nice segue from this one. I think Steve has prepared the ground really nicely. That's going to be on Collegium influenced grading strategies and approaching relationships with students on the whole assessment and grading thing. So thank you for doing some of the spade work for that. Grading through a sacramental lens is what is the way we're playing with that. We're always on the lookout for ideas and people that are willing to share their wisdom with the Collegium community. So please reach out with your excellent ideas or offer up one of your colleagues if you'd like to do that. Give us some ideas. And I'm going to drop both Steve's email and the Collegium email for follow-up that you might want to do. Once we get this recording topped and tailed with the Collegium brand and professionally captioned, we'll make it available on the website. I can't type and talk at the same time. So if anyone else wants to say something while I'm getting these emails in there, that would be great. It's admin@collegium.org, right, Darlene? No.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Great. Hopefully, I'll hear from a few of you, and we'll continue the conversation and see where this goes.
I feel like my whole afternoon is going to be different having been through this, Steve. Thanks so much for getting me to quiet down and slow down. It always feels weird to hit the red button that ends the meeting for everybody. It was wonderful to see your faces, and stay in touch. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
That was brilliant. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.